I never thought I would write down what happened to me, but I have to. I never thought I would write down what happened to me, but I have to. I need someone to know. Someone has to. Because if I tell no one, I'm afraid it will happen again. And I don't think I'll survive it next time. It all started 2 years ago, in late October, right before Halloween. I had just moved to a small, quiet town in Maine, trying to escape the chaos of Boston. I was looking for the kind of town where everyone knows everyone else, where people feel safe enough to leave their doors unlocked at night. I thought it would be peaceful. A fresh start, away from the constant noise of city life, the endless traffic, the soul-crushing pressure. The house I rented was old but charming. A two-story wooden frame house at the very edge of town, bordering a thick, dark forest. The previous owners had left it almost empty, just the bare essentials, and honestly, I liked it that way. It felt like a blank canvas. The house had character. The floors creaked, the windows were a bit drafty, but it all gave it atmosphere, not a sense of fear. I kept telling myself it would be cozy once I finally got everything unpacked. The first few days were completely normal. I unpacked boxes, organized furniture, and tried to settle into my new quiet life. But I noticed something odd almost immediately. There was always a sound, faint, almost inaudible, like soft footsteps coming from upstairs whenever I was on the ground floor. I just chalked it up to the house settling. Old houses make noises, right? That's what I told myself. But then came the whispers. It started as soft murmurs in the dead of night, too quiet to make out any words. I'd wake up suddenly, my heart pounding in my chest, and I'd convince myself I had imagined it. It's just the wind, I'd whisper into the dark. But the whispers weren't random. Soon, they started calling my name. Sometimes it was a quick, sharp Sarah. Other times it was drawn out, like Sarah, as if someone was taunting me from the shadows of my own home. By the end of that first week, I was already a nervous wreck. I started locking all the doors and windows, double-checking everything before I went to bed. I even bought a small security camera for the living room, just to prove to myself that I was imagining things. The first real incident happened on a Thursday night. I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to relax with a cup of tea, when I heard it, the softest, most deliberate creak from the hallway right behind me. I spun around, fully expecting to see a stray cat or maybe a raccoon that had somehow gotten inside. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing. But the air suddenly grew colder, so cold that my breath fogged in front of me even though the heater was on. And then I saw it, a shadow at the far end of the hall. It was taller than a person should be, its proportions all wrong, and it seemed to shift and writhe in a way that made my skin crawl. I froze, my tea forgotten. It didn't move like a person. It didn't seem to move at all, really, but somehow it was closer than it had been just a second ago. I ran. I bolted into the living room, fumbling for my phone, ready to call the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The screen lit up the darkness, and a message was already on the screen. One word, come. I screamed and dropped the phone. It clattered and slid under the couch. My heart was a drum against my ribs. By the time I worked up the courage to get down on my hands and knees and retrieve it, the message was gone. The house was completely silent again, but I could feel it. I could feel something watching me, waiting. The next few days were worse. It was a slow, creeping terror. Doors that I knew I had locked would be standing wide open. Objects moved from one room to another on their own. I'd wake up to find my shoes scattered across the hallway, my books stacked in strange, teetering piles on the stairs, my kitchen knives rearranged on the counter in patterns that made no sense. And the whispers? They grew louder, more insistent, no longer just at night. They were with me all the time, just on the edge of my hearing. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know if I was losing my mind. I decided to record everything. I went out and bought more cameras, placing them in the living room, my bedroom, the kitchen, and especially that terrifying hallway. I set them all to record on motion. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat in my bed, wide awake, listening. Every shadow, every creak, every whisper made my heart pound so hard I thought it would break. At around 3 in the morning, my phone vibrated on the nightstand, a notification. Motion detected in the living room. I crept out of my room, my phone clutched in my hand, and pulled up the live feed. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There, in the middle of my living room, was a figure. A tall, black, featureless silhouette, standing perfectly still. The air around it seemed to shimmer and distort, as if it wasn't quite part of the real world. And then it moved, but not like a person. Its limbs twisted at unnatural angles as it glided toward the camera. My blood ran cold. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It stopped just beyond the camera's direct view. Then it raised a hand, an impossibly long, bony hand with spindly fingers, and pointed, not at the camera. It was pointing directly at me through the phone, as if it knew exactly where I was hiding. And in that moment, I saw its face. It wasn't a human face. It had hollow, empty eyes, skin stretched pale and tight over its skull, and its lips were cracked and twisted into a permanent, horrifying grin. I screamed, dropped my phone, and ran back to my bedroom, barricading the door with my dresser. I stayed there until the sun came up, trembling, praying that it would leave. But it didn't. Over the next week, the activity escalated into a full-blown assault. The whispers followed me everywhere, no matter where I went in the house. The most terrifying part, though, was my reflection. It was no longer just mine. Sometimes when I glanced in a mirror, the face staring back would grin when I didn't. Sometimes it would tilt its head slightly, watching me with an intelligence that wasn't my own. It was a perfect mimic that twisted. I knew I had to leave. I packed my essential things, arranged for movers to get the rest, and on the day I planned to go, I went through the house one last time. That's when I saw it again, in the living room, standing by the window, bathed in the pale morning light, watching me, waiting, and as I stared, frozen in horror, I looked closer at its face, and I realized its face was mine. Every detail, my eyes, my mouth, my hair. But it was all wrong. Hollow, empty, and twisted into that same terrifying, silent grin. And in that instant, I understood. It wasn't just watching me. It wasn't just haunting me. It wanted to be me. It had replaced me in some way. I ran. I didn't look back. I got into my car and I drove without stopping until the town, the forest, and that house faded into the rearview mirror. I never went back. I never got my things. I abandoned everything. I moved to a new city, got a new job, even changed my phone number. I tried to start over again, but every now and then, when I see a shadow in a mirror out of the corner of my eye, or a flicker of movement in a dark window at night, I swear I see that figure again. My own face, staring back at me from the darkness, smiling. I don't know what it wants. I don't know if it's still in that house in Maine, waiting for someone new. But I do know this, whatever it is, it's patient. And it knows my name. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced something you can't explain, let me know in the comments. Stay safe out there, and don't forget to subscribe for more strange tales.